I talk a lot about the importance of showing employees how much they're appreciated. And of course, saying thank you, maybe writing them an occasional thank you note, sending them an email, that kind of thing, all so important. Something else, though, that I always encourage bosses to do is, to find out what really is meaningful to an employee, what would show them special kind of appreciation. So I've even developed a form where employees can indicate, what they like to do in their free time, what kind of music they like to listen to, do they like going to movies, or do they like going to live theater or concerts, that kind of thing. Do they like to do things with their family? Are they outdoors people? What's their favorite candy? What do they like to have for lunch? Just all those kinds of things. And that way, if you want to show someone a quick display of appreciation, you could maybe get a $25 gift card to someone's favorite restaurant, or get them tickets to a concert that is a performer that they really love. Just doing something that is so meaningful to them. It doesn't even have to be very expensive. So let's say you had an employee whose car broke down and they're having to ride the bus for a while or something. You could get them, some bus passes. Surprise someone with their favorite candy on their desk one morning. Just little things like that mean so much to people, because it shows that you're noticing them, that you see each of them as an individual, and that you're not looking at your employees as, a big group of people identified by their number. People want to be noticed as individuals, and the more you can find ways to do that, the more you as a boss will reap the benefits, because they'll be more loyal and more productive. And the bottom line is everyone will be so much happier.
The communication is the single most important thing a leader needs, because you can be great. You can be the smartest person in the room. You can be the most strategic person in the room. You can have all the skills necessary to run a business. But if you cannot favorably and effectively communicate, you're ultimately going to fail, no matter how good you are at everything else. So how do you effectively communicate? Well, the first thing to do is listen. Great communicators listen. Listen to what people are telling you, and understand when you're the leader, when people are talking to you, they have something they want to say. The challenge is to remember that people, as knowing you're the leader, tend to tell you the things you want to hear, as opposed to the things you need to hear. So always take that with a grain of salt. People respond to leaders who listen. Effective listening is the key to great communication. In communication, quantity is always better than quality. Over-communicate at all times. The number one pet peeve of employees in every engagement survey we conduct for clients, or every one I've ever read, is I don't get enough feedback from my boss. I don't have enough communication. When change is enacted, it's not effectively communicated. So no matter how good a boss you are, you're not communicating as often or as well as you think you are. Focus on communicating. Get behind the desk and get away from that desk. Make sure you're always communicating. It should be the first thought on your mind. And it's a challenge, because one of the biggest challenges in leadership is actually finding the time to lead. There's so many other things to do when you're a leader, but don't forget to communicate. And you have to be good in many ways. You have to be a great communicator one-to-group, one-to-one, via email. A technique we're seeing more and more as business leaders are becoming more and more busy, and they don't have time for full staff meetings or executive meetings, is business owners are writing monthly letters to their employees saying, here's what's going on at the company, here's what we're thinking about, here's what we're planning on doing. In lieu of any other communication, that's a really effective way. Don't talk down to people, talk with people. Make sure you communicate, and as often and as well as you think you're communicating, it's not enough, so make sure to do more.
Leadership by example. The greatest case study I've ever seen, my good friend Frances Hesselbein, CEO of the Girl Scouts, asked me to do a program for her. I said, I'm happy to do volunteer work. Got to get my laundry done. I'm going to be out of town every day. Is there a way I can get my laundry done? She said, Marshall, it's not a problem. We've got laundry facilities at that Girl Scout training center. Just put all your laundry in a dirty pile on the floor, and someone will pick up your dirty laundry and carry it to the laundry place, and we'll get it all done by the time you finish. I said, thank you, Frances. Next morning, I'm talking to the head of the Girl Scouts in LA, Chicago, New York, the big cities, very distinguished women. I look up, walking across the halls, my friend Frances Hesselbein carrying the dirty laundry. She didn't say a word. Every woman in that room knew she was the CEO and she was carrying the laundry. I have never seen a better message of servant leadership, of lead by example, and how to treat customers. She didn't have to give a speech. She led by example.
Yeah, well, two pizza teams is something that we've been preaching at Amazon almost from the very beginning, and it's a simple idea, which is no team should be so large that it cannot be fed with just two pizzas. And so obviously to do great things you need big teams, but you need to subdivide them. And the reason that it's so helpful is because there's a natural, we humans grew up around campfires of telling each other stories, and you're sitting at tables tonight that have about 10 people at each table. 10 people, maybe 12 people, is the perfect size to have a natural human coordination without a lot of structure. And if you want to have a big group of 100 people or 500 people organized, you have to have a lot of structure to make that work. And so if you can arrange to do big things with a multitude of small teams, and that takes a lot of effort to organize that way, but if you can figure that out, the communication on those small teams will be very natural and easy.
It sort of should go without saying, and it's surprising that that it still doesn't go without saying at some companies. I mean, if the person who works at your company is 100% proud of the job they're doing, if you give them the tools to do a good job, you know, they're proud of the brand. If they're well looked after, if they're treated well, you know, then you know, they're going to be smiling, they're going to be happy, and therefore the customer you know, will have a nice experience. If the person who's working for your company you know, is not given the right tools, is not looked after, is not appreciated, they're not going to do things with a smile, and therefore you know, the customer will be treated in a way which you know, where often they won't want to come back for more. So you know, so my philosophy has always been, if you can put your staff first, your customers second, and your shareholders third, effectively in the end, the shareholders do well, the customers do better, and your staff are happy.
In order to look at the different types of people we have, I have drawn up a matrix, and we're going to go through 4 different types of people. We're all a mix of all of them, but let's see if you can spot which one is most descriptive of yourself. On your left-hand side, you will see that we have someone who is task-oriented, detail-oriented, and a thinker. And on your right-hand side, we have someone who is much more people-oriented, big picture, and a feeler. Towards the bottom of the screen, we have someone who is more reserved and slow-paced. And at the top, we have the opposite, someone who's outgoing and assertive and much more fast-paced. That gives us these 4 basic types. Let's start with the red, with the driver. The driver is detail-oriented, but impatient in an organization that typically your CEO types. They like results, and the way to influence them is by getting to the point quickly. They like the detail, but they don't have time for the detail, which is a bit of a dichotomy. So give them the executive summary and bullets and let them drive the rest. Let them ask into the detail. Tell them that you have it, and you must absolutely also have it with you. Never say you have it without having the detail there. Now moving to the yellow personality type. These are expressives. They're outgoing, fast, but they're people-oriented, they're feelers. In an organization that typically your salespeople and your marketing people, they like fun. So how to influence them? Well, don't send them long, detailed emails because they may never check their email and certainly not read it if it's a long one. What they would appreciate is that you drop by their desk or you give them a quick phone call. And when you speak to them, make it a bit more fun and outgoing. Make them talk, they like to talk. Ask them how they're doing, how their weekend was. So make it a little bit more lighthearted before you get down to business. Now let's move down and look at the green personality type. These are amiables. Amiables are more reserved and slow-paced, but they're still feelers. These people don't like too much change. They're really all about harmony. They're great listeners, great team players, and in an organization, they're typically your HR professionals or caring professionals. The way to influence them is to sit down, have a one-on-one conversation, and ask them how they're feeling, and give them time to consider their responses. They do not appreciate being put on the spot. Remember, harmony is very important to them. Moving to the last personality type, the blue. These are analyticals. They're driven by compliance and by doing things right. In an organization, they're typically your IT professionals or your accountants and analysts. They are driven by detail and they're reserved. So a good way to influence them is actually through the written media, through email. And they do appreciate the detail. So you can imagine now what happens if someone from a sales department calls someone from the technical department and says, "Can you give me a quick estimate by 4 o'clock?" Now, these people down here don't do quick estimates. They like to do things thoroughly and properly, and that takes time. So such a message is going to frustrate them quite a lot. So my question to you now is, which personality type are you? Are you predominantly red, yellow, green, or blue? That's important because you will tend to communicate from your own preference. But what needs to happen if you want to really influence people is that you need to adapt your style to wherever your stakeholder is, or the senior executive, or your team member, wherever that person is that you want to influence. Adapt your style.
Empowerment means we give people the decision-making authority and the trust to be able to work towards this vision, to allow them the autonomy, the strength, the input, to equip them with the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, the technologies, the tools, the training, to allow them to succeed as they march with us to achieving something extraordinary and phenomenal. That's vital. That's what empowerment is about. And a lot of leaders who come in with a big vision, they get everyone excited, you know, they seem like they want everybody involved, and they do a great job of standing for it, but they don't equip their teams to kick some butt. They never get to that place of real stride, of real momentum. And that happens all the time. Training other people and equipping them with everything they need to succeed has to be a vital practice of every great leader. And again, it doesn't happen just once. That's a huge failure in the working world, especially in corporate America. Great leaders come in, they nail the vision, they get people around it, they stand for something. But they only empower people at the beginning. They give some training and then they just disappear. Training has to be consistent, coaching has to be consistent, equipping people to deal with the new challenges, the new tools, the new technologies, the new competitive realities. That's vital. We have to have that in place.
Milestones are important. We all know that. I just want to argue that they are perhaps even more important than you think. And I want to introduce you just to my term that I call the art of milestoning. I live on a farm in Vermont, and I also have a house and do a lot of business out of Boston. To be specific, it is 178.3 miles from my house in Vermont to my house in Boston. Because I don't like a particular traffic choke point, what that means is typically when I go from Vermont to Boston, I leave somewhere between 3:15 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. That is not exactly my favorite time of the day. And so part of being able to survive the trip, develop to be sure over a period of time, is milestones. There is a specific person's house down the road from my house that is exactly 17.8 miles from home. What does that mean? I have hit the 10% mark. All the way along, I've got these things. I know where the 25% point is. I know where the 50% point is. There's a restaurant and a place to go to the bathroom there. And even though it's not open when I do it in the morning, I still say, oh my God, I've made it to the restaurant with the bathroom, even though I can't go into the bathroom. I'm halfway down the pike. There's the point when there are 50 miles left. There's the 23-mile point. Every single one of those points is a critical milestone that keeps me awake, that keeps me going. Now, the point is, it's not like there's a milestone every 10 miles, there's a milestone every 15 miles, there's a milestone every half hour. It is a process of art. The ones that are precisely spaced, so it'll keep my energy and my morale going and so on. I'm sure that's far more than you are interested in relative to my Vermont to Boston trip. But the point is, every project consists of milestones. That set of milestones typically consists of tasks. I'm arguing it's very, very, very malleable. First of all, people need a small win, and they need a small win within the first 48 or 72 or 96 hours. Fine. So redesign the first task so the task is small enough so that a piece of the task can be done in 96 hours. And that is the game, in the best sense of the human game, that you play all the way through. Design the milestones to keep people excited, to keep them engaged. Celebrate the living dickens out of the smallest ones as well as the biggest one. There is an art that is almost a science, if you are in fact a student of social psychology, to designing perfect milestones. Please become a milestone-er extraordinaire. It's really exceptionally important.
Here's master mindset number 1 to become a pro at giving workplace feedback. Number 1, your goal is to build professional partnerships with your people, not just relationships. Feedback is the primary communication tool that you will use to build strong, robust, rigorous working partnerships because work is tough. Number 2, trust is the bedrock of professional, effective partnerships. And how we build that trust is number 3, by providing candid, timely, honest, helpful feedback to people with frequency and consistency in the workplace. This is the type of the feedback that says, I care enough about you that I want you to be successful, that I want you to have this information to be successful. Now, newer managers or supervisors get this one wrong all the time. The best way to build trust fastest and earliest with your people is become a trusted talent manager who they can count on to provide candid and kind feedback to help them be successful.
Learn to spend 80% of your time as a leader with the 20%. For maximum efficiency and productivity, this is part of the key. Since it's going to be 80-20, and there's plenty of examples to show that it's 80-20, not exactly, but fairly close. Ask the minister of the church who picks up the tab here, and he'll say, probably, 20% of the people pick up 80% of the tab. I mean, this is called one of those things, okay? So what do? Well, you learn to work with it and not try to solve it. It's like trying to solve the seasons. You don't solve the seasons, you learn to work with the seasons. They're all set. And some of these things by history are all set. The key is to learn to work with the way it is set. So part of the key of leadership is learning to spend 80% of your time with the 20% because they're doing the 80%. We would call that good leadership sense. Now you say, well, how do you do that? Let me give you part of the answer in how to do that. Here it is. Spend individual time with the 20% and group time with the 80%. This is part of the answer to leadership skills. However, guess who wants your individual time? The wrong group. But that's what life's all about, right? Accepting this challenge. So now you've got to be what we call clever. And you've got to be, another key word, diplomatic. Diplomacy and strategy are 2 key words for leadership to understand. Diplomacy and strategy. Here's part of the diplomacy. Mary comes and says, I've got a question. You say, Mary, bring your question Saturday morning. I'm going to meet with everybody, and I'll cover it then. She says, okay. Now, it might not be that easy. But if you start trying to put this in perspective now, groups, you can deal with the 80% by groups, and you can talk to the 20% individual. Now, the pull is in the opposite direction, and it always is. Gravity is the downward pull. Life is the struggle in the opposite direction of gravity. It's downward pull. Life is moving in the opposite direction of the normal negative. Now somebody says, well, I'll just fire the 80%. They're only doing 20% of the business. Well, I wouldn't fool with that. Because after you've fired the 80%, before too long, whoever is left, 20% of them will be doing 80% of the business, and 80% will be doing 20%. All right, this is not something you fire. This is something you learn to work with. The 80-20 rule, very important rule.